This is a little video on negative painting. So initially I'm painting on a black canvas that I used iron oxide black, which is a very flat black. So I'm just sketching in this white pine fairly loosely. I was using white chalk just to sketch out the tree. The nice thing about chalk is it really doesn't interfere with the paint. If the chalk's pretty heavy, sometimes you have to put a little more paint to get through it, but generally you can just paint as if it's not there. I'm going to be using the number 2 rigger and the 3/8 inch flat. This flat is a little different than most. It's long hair, and I like the long haired ones because I can paint longer. I'm going to start off by mixing a dark green using the phthalo blue and burnt sienna, and it's going to look pretty black to you, but we're going to throw in some of the white in there, and you can see what a lovely green that makes. And so if we push more burnt sienna into it, we can see that the green gets a little more desaturated, but I think I like that high saturation. So I'm going to use a knife to take off some of the excess paint from that. I don't like mixing with knives. I find that they don't do as smooth a job as quickly as a brush does. So we're just going to mostly catch the light areas of this tree, and so we're going to just add some little details in the stroke. I'm going to take some of that paint off so we can get some crisper marks. And don't think that you stay away from the trunk, because a lot of these pine needles on most evergreens are coming out towards you or leaving from behind. So you want to make sure that you're try and use that brush to get some interesting marks on there. Keep looking at the reference. It doesn't matter if we copy that tree, but we do want to get a good sense of how white pines grow. They are definitely an iconic tree for Ontario. And I think I did say that this video is about negative painting, but we are not negative painting at the moment. We are just building the positive shape of that tree, and we'll resort to negative painting shortly. You can see that I'm not worrying about stepping in the lines. The lines really were just to give me an idea of where these branches, the major parts of these branches were. I might just throw in a little tuff there between branches. One of the interesting things about evergreens or conifers is that you can count their age by counting the branches going up a tree, because they set out a new branch each year at the top. And so by counting the ring or the places the branches, and you do have to count the ones where all the branches have been broken off through age, or I'm just going to do this little separate tree off the side. One of the things about white pines is that their branches, especially when they're at the top of the tree, point up, and as they get older and heavier, they start to droop down, sort of like us. We start off nice and upright and then lose some of that vigor as we get older. Not that we're getting old, but so I think. So I've given this green a chance to dry. I am going to just chalk in a little bit more of the around. This area is going to be left black, but some areas I just want a little bit more black than what I'm showing there. And so not really a heck of a lot, but okay, so now this is, I'm going to be painting the sky negatively. So I'm going to, on the palette, there's very little red here, but that's left over from the last one I did. And this is now not yellow deep, but the yellow medium. And this is bismuth yellow. This is a much better covering yellow than your Airlight or Azo yellow. I'm just going to put a little bit of white in there, which is going to make it even better for covering. Yellows typically are very weak. So we've just got, I think, I like that color, but I don't think there's enough of it there for our needs. So I'm just going to mix up a bit more. So I'm going to start at the bottom. So we're just going to start cutting in around that tree. So and I'm deliberately not going right up next to the green because I want to get that little bit of black showing there. When I dipped in the water there, I stayed, because I'm using this light orange, I went into water that already had that orangey color. That's not, that's merely just to try and keep the paint fairly clean. So we're just going to put a little bit in there. So this is going to be a sunset sky, so I'm just picking up this color. This was a combination of the red, yellow, and ultramarine blue with white, and so we're just making a light gray color. Going to pick up some of that, get it more a little bit into the, I think we need a bit more yellow in that. And it looks about right, but it's going to be drying darker, so we just add more white to that, and then the final test, yeah, it's not a huge difference, but it is going to dry darker. So we're just going to drop and roll that. There's a little bit of green in that brush, but I don't think it's going to be enough to worry about us. So I was just taking, there's a little too much paint on that brush to really cut in nice and neat. So I'm just going to give a little bit of dab down there. When you're painting negatively, the trick is that you have to look at both the positive and the negative space that you're working in. So I'm just, and one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to, I think I'm going to use a smaller, that was a 6 that I picked up there. So we're going to come in and just paint in some of the negative spaces in between there. It's important when you're doing negative space that you're using the right color. I don't want to use this color down there. You want to use the color that is seen in the back of the, or what's behind the tree, not in the back. So you want to use the sky color from that area. And again, when you're doing the negative space, you want to keep a variety. Don't do the same spot, but you're trying to picture the positive shape there, not, you're just not adding dots here and there. So I'm going to come back, clean that brush, come back over to our more saturated color, and we're just going to drop in some of those colors there. And so these are the pinholes looking through to the sky. And so you keep looking at the reference, seeing where those pinholes are. And again, it never matters if you're painting that tree exactly. What we're trying to capture is the feel of that tree. And so be careful not to paint sky through the trunk there. It's easy to get carried away and start dabbing everywhere. And one of the nice things about negative painting, if you've done a brush stroke that maybe wasn't the most brilliant, it gives you a second chance to shape that tree, second, third, maybe even fifth. So we're just coming back to our gray-green color here. We're going to continue up the canvas. And one of the things I like to do, I'm going to change colors again shortly, but I don't like to change the color on one side of the branch and have a different color on the other side. I like to see that color above so that people can see the transition rather than just all of a sudden, why the heck did that change color? So I think we're going to go grayer still. So I'm just going to pull in some of this gray. This is a little bit darker and grayer. So it's not quite fully mixed. So I'm picturing sort of a semi-overcast day that's near sunset or sunrise. It's sometimes hard to tell. But I'm not coming in, I'm not coloring. That's what you want to avoid, is you don't want to come in and color these spaces. You want to just come in and pull a brush stroke out. You will find it's better if you're going into a corner. Don't go into a corner, come out of a corner, so that you come in with your brush loaded, you come in and you pull out. That way you're not ending up with a puddle on the inside there. So I'm just going to come back to my rigger. I'm not blending this between colors. What I'm doing is I'm mixing the different colors. I'm going to take some of that paint off that brush. There doesn't seem to be much on the palette. And so when I'm coming in, these are the fine branches below. And so I want to make sure that I'm creating interesting shapes, that I'm not getting repetitive with those shapes. Repetition is something that, I don't know why, but we're incredibly good at repetition. And so as a painter, you want to try to avoid that. So I think I'm just going to put a little more right there, and then maybe one stroke. I'm not sure what that was, but didn't like that. So now I'm going to start shifting this more into the blue side. And the blue's making it darker, so I'm adding white to that. So and we can leave some of the color or the black color between the colors in the sky. I think it just adds a little bit more interest. And the same reason in the quick and easy one that we did. The function of the black here is the black is very neutral. I do not use black when I'm painting other than as a background. And I use that black background because of that neutral, and it makes even dull colors look quite sharp and interesting because of its total lack. In high school, I always stood next to the ugly guys just so I looked that much better. Makes me wonder if my friends from high school ever see this, what they're going to think. They'll say, well, that's what we were doing. So I'm just going to do a little bit there and then maybe a stroke that way and maybe just one there. So now I think I'm going to clean that brush. But let's do a little bit of negative painting in there. So you're looking at the reference where to get ideas. Like again, we're not concerned if it matches. All we're concerned is that we get the same sort of negative spaces that are happening in that tree. And when you're doing this, make sure you're using the same color that is on the sky behind. Don't all of a sudden have a bright blue where you've got a gray cloud. Your average viewer won't necessarily pick it up, but they know there's something not right in it. So now I've got the clean brush and I'm coming down into this. This is ultramarine blue and white without the orange in there. So I'm just going to go a little bit bluer. There's a possibility that you put the wrong color somewhere. Don't try and fix it at that time. Just wait for it to dry. And then you can come back and either, like, I mean, if it's a major mistake, you can paint the black over. But if it's just a small mistake, you can generally just put one color or another over top of it to fix that. So I'm just going to come in with a small brush again and clean that up. I mean, you can come back and do this after. You don't have to do this right now, but it is easy if you've got the color, you know which color it is. So it's not a bad idea to do that, but sometimes it's easier to come back in after, and we will do some of that, but where you can see without the chalk, because the chalk is helpful here, but it's also interferes in what the final product looks like. So I'm just going to come in here bluer now, a little darker. I think I'm just going to touch a little bit of that phthalo blue. Just the phthalo blue is quite a saturated blue, so that just saturates that up a little bit, just so that, yeah, that's a nice punchy blue. I mean, it's certainly, we can take that higher up or higher saturation, but I think that, and so we've got this fairly nice graduated sky coming up. I like these flat brushes because you can use the corner of the brush to get into small spaces, and you can get, I think, quite a nice variety of marks from that. I chose the, I often do this with a rigger, but there are larger spaces in this particular painting that I wanted to be able to use that broad stroke to fill it in fairly quickly. I'm just using the other brush to take some of the paint out of that brush. I don't have a lot of that there, so I definitely want quite a bit of negative painting under this one here, which is why I extended the black with the chalk. Again, making sure we're not being too repetitive with the strokes. So I've given that a few minutes to dry there. And so now I'm just going to lightly come in. You want to be careful here that to make sure that it's all dry. I'm pretty sure it is. So now we can see the full effect of the black. I'm using a blue paper towel here because the regular white paper towels can have a tendency to ball, and it's not that it's a problem other than that you have to then take those balls off. So now we can really see what we've got, and so we'll come in and tweak it here and there. So actually I think what I'm going to do first, before we do any more negative painting, I'm going to come in and palette is a little dry there. So I'm just putting out a little bit of that black oxide. That's that Amsterdam. It's generally considered a student grade paint, but I really love how flat that is. So I'm just putting in a few fine branches in the black oxide, which is what was used on the background. And so I'm just using a number 2 rigger. It's a very fine rigger, and I'm using the paint very thinly. We're just going to pull this one out of it. These are some dead branches that were in that. And when you're using a rigger, if that paint is nice and thin, it's much easier to get the thin lines out of the rigger. And don't have tons of paint on that. And so you can put in some lines that maybe help these branches make a little more sense. You don't see as many on these smaller trees. We'll put a few in there. And you want to be careful you don't overdo it. It's not like ice cream where a little's good and more is better. Sometimes it's, in painting, it's a little less is better. I just wanted to extend this branch out a little bit farther than what it went in there, so I'm just reapplying the black, and I'll come back in with the green on top after it dries. So we making sure it's nice and opaque. I think we'll just push that even farther. Okay, so now I'm going to look at, while we're waiting for that to dry, look at putting some lighter green on top. So we'll just try putting some of that yellow into that green. I don't like where that's going, so we'll just add some burnt sienna, which will desaturate it down. We'll bring up the white a bit in that, and I don't mind that. I think it needs to be a bit lighter though, and it has to be a bit lighter because it's going to dry darker. So we're just going to throw some of these strokes, and this is just on top where the light is hitting it. Trying to stay away from the edges a bit because I don't want to have to lose that black, but I will show you that you can put the black back in if you want to. It's better not to have to do that because it looks a little different, but as long as you're not having to totally redo it, you should be fine. Trying to keep the brush strokes unique and different, but for the most part horizontal, as that's the way the branches are laying. It's looking a little bit bitty up here, so we'll just attach some of those greens. And when I say bitty, I mean that the grouping doesn't look like it's grouped together. It's just sort of looking a little too individual dots, and that sort of breaks down the image a bit. I'm just nearly there. Just want to wonder if that paint is dry enough.